Did you know that these moments were changed from the book, or simply never happened at all? Things like Neville's family and background as the second chosen one, giving important lines to the wrong character, the exclusion of spew, and many more details just like those are the perfect example of what happens when a written work is adapted to a film format. It is unavoidable and sometimes necessary in order for the story to work on a new medium. But there is one major downside. All of the juicy lore and small to large details we get when we let ourselves fall into the universe of a fantasy book gets crunched down to a couple of hours to fit on the screen, and we miss out on what we fell in love with in the first place. This isn't to say movie adaptations are bad, as the Harry Potter film series is one of my all-time favorites and holds a nostalgic place in my heart. But if you have read the books, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't read the books, then this series is going to help uncover what you've been missing all of this time. My name is Gibby, and welcome to the first episode of Movies vs. Manuscripts, Harry Potter Edition. This is the series where I go scene by scene and analyze the adapted work against the original, and give you every little detail you missed if you only watch the films. Everything from the color of someone's hair to the plot lines that were completely removed. I've got you covered. And like I said, even if you've read the books, this gives you a chance to relive some of your favorite moments in the wizarding world. If you are familiar with my series on Lord of the Rings, you'll know that I cover changes across 4 major categories: characters, location, timeline, and plot. But for this series, I'm going to be adding a 5th section, which will pop up here and there, and that is context. You see, there are a lot of parts, like the scene we are covering today, that need context above and beyond simple plot points that are changed, as there are a lot of moments that the author writes about that are simply left out of the movie. So buckle up, as today we dive into Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or as you may know it, Sorcerer's Stone, and uncover all of the changes made to Scene 1 of this beloved film. And if you feel like your YouTube feed has been lacking quality content recently, subscribe and turn on notifications, as this series will probably be going on for a few years before I get through everything. First up, as I'll do in every episode, let's refresh our memory on what happens in this scene before we jump into the changes. The film opens by showing a dimly lit street named Privet Drive in the middle of the night. An owl flies by, and a man wearing a large robe, pointed hat, and half-moon spectacles walks out of the shadows into the street. We know him as Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of all time. He walks onto the street and pulls out of his robe pocket a silver device that looks like a cigar lighter. He clicks it open several times, and each time he does, a light from the street lamps travels into the device, which causes the whole street to go dark. We also see a tabby cat watching him from the sidewalk. Shortly after deluminating the street, Albus calls out the cat as Professor McGonagall, and it transforms into a severe-looking woman. She walks up to him, and as they both head down the street, she questions him on if the rumors are true. He confirms her suspicions and says that someone named Hagrid is bringing a boy to where they are. Out of the sky, a large flying motorcycle with an even larger man comes into view and lands in the middle of the street. The man, who we know as Hagrid, steps off the bike and hands what seems to be a baby over to Professor Dumbledore. As they approach the door of a house on Privet Drive, Professor McGonagall expresses her concern about leaving the boy with this specific family. She says that she's watched them all day and that they are the worst kind of people. Dumbledore interjects and says that they are the only family he has, referring to the baby. And McGonagall continues and states that the boy will be famous, and not a child in their world will not know his name, further confirming Dumbledore's wisdom to let this family take him in. Dumbledore says that he is better off growing up away from all of that until he is ready. He sets the baby down on the doorstep and leaves a note on him addressed to a Mr. and Mrs. Dursley. And the scene ends with Dumbledore saying, "Good luck, Harry Potter." Alright, so if that didn't click the nostalgia button in you, I don't know what will. But now we know what happened in this first scene, and I gotta say, they left a lot out from what's in the book. Like, a lot. So today, I'm not only going to cover everything they changed, but I'm also going to include that little thing called context to help you understand the start of the entire Harry Potter series that was completely removed from the film adaptation. This is where J.K. Rowling really needs credit for world building, and this will be a continued theme throughout all of the movies, as a lot of detail that she puts into the wizarding world and overall story got cut from the films for time. So join me as we uncover the true start to this epic story that is Harry Potter's life. First, let's go over the category of characters. We only meet 4 characters in this scene of the movie, but from what I counted, there are actually 12 characters mentioned in the book. The characters we see in this scene are Albus Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall, Rubeus Hagrid, and of course, Harry Potter. The characters in the book who aren't shown or talked about in the movie are Lily and James Potter, Vernon Dursley, Petunia Dursley and their son Dudley, a young Sirius Black, Daedalus Diggle, and last but definitely not least, Voldemort. In fact, a majority of this chapter is about the Dursleys and Mr. Dursley's day at work, which we'll get into in a moment. Before we leave the character section, however, there is one last change in regards to the characters, and that is the description of Hagrid. You see, in the book, he is described as nearly twice as tall as a regular man and 5 times as wide. I don't know about you, but in the movie, he is only a couple of feet taller than Dumbledore. If he was twice the size, he would be a lot taller. Now, in all honesty, I totally get why they didn't follow this exact description, because that would have made shooting the films really annoying. Hagrid has a lot of dialogue with Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and if he was twice their size, it would be really strange to watch as a viewer. The way they did it gives the idea that he is abnormally large, but it doesn't make it so drastic that you find it unrealistic he can exist in the world. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine someone twice the height of an average man just walking through the streets of London with Harry. Anyway, as for location and timeline differences, there's only a couple of changes. First, the location is condensed to the short moment on Privet Drive for the movie, but in the books, we get a sneak peek of the Dursleys and Vernon's day at work. So we are just missing the location of Vernon going into the city for work. Second, as far as timeline goes, it all still adds up, as in the book, Harry gets dropped off at the Dursleys the same night of Voldemort's attack on his parents in Godric's Hollow. I guess you could consider them skipping over the whole day and going straight to the drop-off as a timeline error, but this isn't a major one, so I think they're still all good. Lastly, we have our category of plot changes. Since the most obvious change is the omission of a significant portion of the first chapter, I want to spend some time going over what was left out of the movie. The book opens by introducing us to the Dursleys, a family that lives on Privet Drive and is proud that they lead a normal life. The narration follows the day of the father of the family, Vernon. He says goodbye to his wife Petunia and his baby boy Dudley as he heads off to work. He's the director of a firm named Grunnings that sells drills. But this isn't just any normal day. We learn that there are a multitude of owls out and about, much to the surprise of Vernon and everyone else around who rarely or have never seen the birds. Vernon also takes a note of a cat outside of his house who seems to be reading a map and looking at their street sign, but he quickly corrects his mind and remembers that cats can't read. As he heads off to work, he notices a lot of strangely dressed people about. People in weird hats and colorful cloaks. He has a normal morning, but the mood quickly changes over lunch when he overhears some of the weirdly dressed people outside mention the name Harry Potter. This is a familiar name, as earlier in the book we learn that Petunia, his wife, has a secret. Her secret is that she has a sister who is married and has a child around the age of her own child, Dudley, who she never speaks of and absolutely despises. And it just so happens that Vernon seems to recall the name of his secret nephew is Harry Potter. He tries to tell himself that this is a common name, and he goes about his day. But at the end of his workday, as he is walking outside of the building, a small man in a robe walks into him. But the man isn't upset about it and gleefully tells him that today is a great day because you-know-who has gone at last, and even muggles such as Vernon should be happy today. After this strange encounter, Vernon goes home and sees the cat again, but puts it out of his mind. At the dinner table, he watches the news and hears the weatherman talk about owls and shooting stars, and Vernon finally decides to ask his wife about her sister. Petunia is perturbed by the question, but confirms that the name of her nephew is Harry, although she says it's a common name in her opinion, and Vernon is eased by this. Finally, they head to bed, and that is where we pick up in this scene of the movie. As you can see, a lot of context is skipped over. First, we hear the term muggle for the first time. Second, we hear about you-know-who for the first time. We also get a good idea of the type of people that the Dursleys are, more than just McGonagall saying they are the worst type of people. Now, as for the changes to these scenes, the first change is that Dumbledore apparates onto the street, but we only see him walk into view in the movie. I'm guessing this is because of technological reasons. As we know in Fantastic Beasts, and even the future Harry Potter movies, they really spare no chance to show apparition, as it's one of the coolest wizarding things you can do. So I think they just didn't show it here because they didn't really want to spend the money on doing the CGI to make it work. It is much easier just to have Dumbledore walk on frame and the viewer can assume that he apparated into the woods. Next, Dumbledore and McGonagall's dialogue is much more extensive in the book. We hear about the Potters, and Professor McGonagall confirms their death with Dumbledore. We hear about Voldemort and how Dumbledore is the only one who is powerful enough to face him, which is a recurring theme later in the series. And we also get a name drop of Daedalus Diggle in regards to why there are shooting stars in the sky. Daedalus really isn't important, but it's another touch of world building that is left out of the films. When Voldemort gets brought up, Dumbledore even encourages McGonagall to say his name, which she eventually does. Next, when Hagrid shows up, he name drops Sirius Black and says he borrowed the flying motorcycle from him. Of course, we know that Sirius plays a much larger role later in the story. And that wraps up all of the changes for this scene. I'm unable to dive into every single line they speak because that would take hours to go over. But trust me, if there is a noticeable and impactful line that is altered or given to another character, I will make sure to bring it up. For this episode, the most you need to know is that Dumbledore and McGonagall have an extensive talk about the night's events, and we as the readers are given a little taste of the wizarding world and some of the key characters. We don't get this in the movie, and I can't help but think that they made this film assuming people had read the books. Of course, we learn this key information later in the movie, but if this was not based on a book, I would guess that they would have shared a bit more context up front. If you have read the books, then this opening scene makes total sense, and to hear the info again would be repetitive in that moment. But for a newbie, I think this bit of world building is crucial to a good story. Specifically, I think the inclusion of Mr. Dursley's day at work would have been nice. I know the Dursleys aren't the main characters, but I think opening with their family would have been an interesting way to intro the film, as you would be able to juxtapose their normal life against the whirlwind of a life that Harry is about to experience. And if you have read the books, you know that the Dursleys play a much larger role throughout the entire book series. But as for this scene, I think we have covered all that we can, and I hope you stick around for all the future episodes as we get into even more lore on the wizarding world. Remember, this is just scene 1, and there's a lot more to discover. So, what is your favorite part of this first chapter of the book? Is there anything you wish they would have done differently for this scene? I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this part of the movie, and I can't wait to dive into the next chapter. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.